My childhood was stolen when my religious leader locked me away and controlled every part of my life. I finally exposed him and walked away for good. But now, 5 years later, he's returned claiming he can purify my soul. It started when I was just 7 years old, a bewildered orphan dropped at the gates of what was called a religious institute. But for me, that was day one in hell. Within a month, I learned that silence wasn't just golden, it was survival. In a few years, I knew the exact look in an elder's eyes right before they were about to add another scar to your soul. I truly believed I'd never get out, not until I turned 16. Then came James. God, James. We were doing candle prep, and he leaned in just a whisper, asking, "You think the trees outside the fence are really poisonous?" I actually chuckled. I know, right? Later, I told another friend what he'd said. That was my mistake. The very next morning, James's bed was empty. The sisters told us he'd been called to divine isolation. I didn't know what that meant. And for the first time, I broke one of the main rules. I asked a question. The sister just handed me a wire, brush, and told me to clean the chapel stones until I could see my own reflection in them. Later, they dragged me in front of the whole congregation. "Confess," they shrieked. "Let her tongue be washed of sin." They fed me the words, doubt, arrogance, attachment. I said them. But I was crying. Not for myself, not for the pain. I was crying for James. After that, I learned. I watched. I adapted. The next time someone confided in me, a girl who whispered she missed her mom, I didn't hesitate. I told the elders. They praised me, gave me warmer clothes, better food. They called it loyalty. I called it survival. I climbed the ranks. Fast memorized more scripture. Got pulled into private teachings behind locked doors. That's where I saw them. Books the prophet never spoke of. Photos of bustling cities. Articles that contradicted everything we were taught. They told me I was blessed. I told myself that too, just so I could sleep at night. Then, Elijah. He was soft-spoken, far too kind for that place. One morning, he even gave me his coat during chores, said I looked cold. When they accused him of spreading doubt, I tried to speak up. "He's not like that," I pleaded. The prophet just looked at me with this chilling disappointment. "Even our brightest blossoms can rot," he said. They tied Elijah to the prayer post, beat him until the wood turned dark with his blood, and then cast him out with nothing but red on his shirt and snow in his hair. No one said a word that night. I learned a brutal truth. Defending someone in the garden means you join them in the fire. So I shut up. I reported more. I baptized myself until my lips turned blue. God, I hated myself, but at least I was alive. Then, one surreal night, someone climbed through the kitchen window. Jeans, a hoodie. Her voice trembled. "I used to live here," she whispered. "I'm here for my brother. Please help me." My heart hammered. I almost screamed. Almost reported her. But something inside me, something I thought was long dead, cracked open. "I know where he is," I said, my own voice trembling. "But you need to help me too." Before she left, she handed me a phone. "When you have enough proof," she said, "use this." It felt like holding a grenade. For a week, I didn't touch it. Then I did. I broke into the prophet's study. I took photos, IDs, records, fake passports. That's when I found out our prophet wasn't from the homelands. He was from Florida. His real name was David Marks. And he had our social security numbers, our banking details. He was selling our identities. I stuffed it all into a bag, snuck through the orchard, past the apiary, past the blackthorn trees. I could smell the asphalt. I was so close. Then, hands. Grabbing. Dragging. I thought I was done for. But I played it smart. As they dragged me away, I managed to hide the phone in my shirt. They locked me in a cold room. No food, no light, for 3 days. I tried to call for help, but there was no service. Then, the prophet himself opened the door. He sat across from me with that same gentle, terrifying smile. "You're sick," he whispered. "Sick with the world." I just stared at his shoes. "You can be healed," he promised, offering me a choice. Come back, confess, keep his secret, or be punished, spiritually dead. I told him I needed to pray on it. I asked if I could just sleep in my old bed. He let me. And that very night, I used the phone to send everything. In the morning, the cops came, but they didn't help in the way I expected. I watched them drag David Marks into the snow in his white prophet robe, watched the elders scream blasphemy. I didn't say a word. But I saw her. A girl, maybe 9, peeking from a dorm window. She looked just like me, terrified. I gave her a tiny wave, because now maybe she could make it out too. That was 3 years ago. I'm 21 now. The first few months after the raid were honestly the hardest. I had no idea how to function in the real world. The police put me in touch with a support group for cult survivors. That's where I properly met Melissa, the woman who'd climbed through our kitchen window that night. Her brother was Marcus, the one who'd been in divine isolation for questioning why we couldn't have contact with our families. She'd escaped the garden 5 years before me and had been trying to get him out ever since. I moved in with Melissa temporarily. Her apartment was small, but it exploded with colors. Bright cushions, posters, clothes in every shade imaginable. After the monochrome existence of the garden, it was overwhelming at first. She taught me basic stuff I never learned. How to use a microwave, how to open a bank account, how to talk to people without constantly watching my words. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still wake up at 4:30 a.m. expecting morning prayers. Old habits die hard. The first time I went to a grocery store, I had a panic attack right there in the cereal aisle. Too many choices. In the garden, we ate what they gave us, period. Melissa found me sitting on the floor, hyperventilating. She just sat down next to me until I could breathe again. She didn't make a big deal out of it. That's when I knew we'd be friends for life. I got my GED last year. Turns out I'm pretty good at math. The garden's education was mostly scripture memorization and farming skills, but they did teach us basic arithmetic for accounting. I'm taking community college classes now. The campus feels enormous, people rushing in all directions, everyone with somewhere to be. Sometimes the professors say things that would have gotten me a week in divine isolation back then. I still catch myself looking over my shoulder. After the raid, most of the kids from the garden got placed with relatives or in foster care. The older ones like me were basically on our own. Some went back to families they barely remembered. Others disappeared into homelessness, or worse. The system isn't set up for people like us. We don't know how to function in society. We don't have normal IDs or work history. Some of us don't even have birth certificates. I started volunteering at the support group that helped me. At first, I just made coffee and arranged chairs. Then I started sharing my story with new arrivals. I could see it in their eyes. That relief when they realized I understood. I'd been there. I knew what it was like to question your own reality. Last month, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Lily, the little girl I'd waved to during the raid. She'd kept my number memorized for 3 years. She'd been placed with an aunt in a neighboring state, a woman who tried her best but couldn't understand why Lily was afraid of telephones or why she hoarded food under her bed. She was struggling. Could we meet? We got coffee at a diner near her school. She looked so different. Jeans, a t-shirt with some band logo, normal teenager stuff. But her eyes were the same. Cautious, watchful, always looking for the trap. She told me some of the elders had regrouped. They'd started a new community 2 states over. Smaller, more secretive. They were reaching out to former members, especially kids placed with non-believing relatives, promising them salvation if they returned, threatening eternal damnation if they didn't. I felt sick to my stomach. I thought it was over when David Marks went to prison. But cults don't die easily. They adapt. They find new leaders, new victims. Lily showed me messages from other garden kids. Some were actually thinking of going back. The outside world was too hard, too confusing. At least in the garden, they knew the rules. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Nathan, about Benjamin, about all the others who disappeared into divine isolation. I remembered the documents I'd found in the prophet's office, the fake passports, the financial records. I'd turned everything over to the police, but what if there was more? What if these new elders were just continuing where David Marks left off? I called Melissa at 2 a.m. She answered on the first ring, like she always does for me. We need to do something, I told her. She didn't even ask what I meant. She just said, I know, come over tomorrow, we'll make a plan. And that's how our little rescue operation started. Just me, Melissa, and a few other garden survivors. We created a network to reach out to former members. We set up a hotline. We made emergency kits with basic necessities and instructions on how to get help. We started documenting everything. We could remember about the garden, the abuse, the isolation, the mind control techniques. It's dangerous work. The new elders have money, influence. They have true believers willing to do anything for them. But we have something stronger. We have the truth, and we have each other. We called ourselves the Seedlings. Kind of ironic, since that's what they called the youngest kids at the garden. Our first real case came about a month after talking with Lily, a teenage boy named Ryan contacted our hotline. He was 17, placed with his grandmother after the raid. His older sister was still with the new group, and she'd been messaging him to come back. Said the outside world would destroy his soul. I met Ryan at a coffee shop near his school. He looked like any other teenager, hoodie, backpack, headphones around his neck. But I recognized the way he scanned the room before sitting down, how he flinched when the barista called out an order too loudly. Garden habits. My sister says they found a new prophet, he told me, his voice barely above a whisper. Says he's even more powerful than David Marks, that he can actually perform miracles. My stomach dropped. Did she tell you his name? Ryan nodded. Elder Thomas. I remembered him. Tall, thin man with a permanent scowl. He'd been in charge of discipline at the garden. I still have a small scar on my palm from when he'd made me hold a burning candle as penance for speaking during silent meditation. Where are they located? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ryan pulled out his phone, showed me some messages. Somewhere in rural Ohio. She won't give me the exact address until I promise to join them. I took photos of the messages with my phone. Ryan, listen to me. Don't respond to her anymore. These people are dangerous. His eyes filled with tears. But she's my sister. What if she's in trouble? I reached across the table, touched his hand. That's why we're going. To help her. But we need to be smart about it. I called Melissa as soon as I left the coffee shop. We needed to find this new compound. The messages Ryan showed me mentioned a place called New Eden. Real original. But Ohio's a big state, and these groups are good at staying hidden. Our break came from an unexpected source. Marcus, Melissa's brother, who'd been in divine isolation. He'd kept in touch with a few garden members who still believed but hadn't joined the new group. One of them, a woman named Dorothy, had been invited to New Eden but declined. She had an address. It's a trap, said Henry, another garden survivor who joined our group. We were sitting in Melissa's living room, pizza boxes on the coffee table. They know Marcus got out. They know he has connections to us. They're trying to lure us in. Maybe, Melissa said, but it's the only lead we have. I stared at the address Dorothy had provided, a rural property about 3 hours from where we were. We need to check it out, just reconnaissance. We don't approach anyone, we don't try to contact anyone inside. We just confirm if it's them. Henry shook his head. And then what? We can't just call the cops. They're not doing anything illegal by living together in the middle of nowhere. He was right. After the raid on the garden, the authorities had found evidence of identity, theft and fraud, which is what put David Marks in prison. But they couldn't arrest people for believing weird stuff or living in a commune. We needed proof of actual crimes. Let's start with surveillance, I suggested. If it is them, we need to know how many people are there, especially kids. We need to document everything. So that's how I ended up in Melissa's beat-up Honda, driving through rural Ohio with a pair of binoculars and a camera in my backpack. Henry came with us, along with Douglas, another former garden member who'd been part of their security team and knew their protocols. The property was at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by dense woods. We parked about a mile away and hiked in, staying hidden among the trees. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Being back in the woods, sneaking around, it felt too much like being back at the garden. There, Douglas whispered, pointing through a break in the trees. I raised the binoculars. A large farmhouse came into view with several outbuildings. Scattered around it, people in familiar white garments moved between the buildings. My mouth went dry. It was them. I count at least 20 people, Melissa murmured, looking through her own binoculars. Mostly adults, but there are some teenagers. Maybe younger kids inside. We watched for hours, taking photos, noting patterns. They had guards, something the garden never had. Men with serious expressions patrolling the perimeter. This group was more paranoid, more prepared. As the sun started to set, they gathered in what looked like a barn. Through an open door, I could see them kneeling, in rows, and at the front, a familiar tall figure with arms raised, Elder Thomas, now the self-proclaimed chosen voice. We need to go, Douglas whispered urgently. Night prayers will end soon, and they'll do a perimeter check. We retreated through the darkening woods, my mind racing. This was worse than I thought. The New Eden group wasn't just a few diehards clinging to old beliefs. This was organized, structured. They had resources. Back at Melissa's apartment, we spread our photos across the kitchen table. They've got solar panels, Henry pointed. Out. Rainwater collection systems. They're trying to be self-sufficient. And those guards weren't just for show, Douglas added. I recognized Brian and Larry from the security team at the garden. They've had training. I studied a photo of the main house. We need to get inside somehow. We need to know what they're planning. Melissa gave me a sharp look. No way. It's too dangerous. I'm not saying we just walk up to the front door, I argued. But we need more information. Ryan's sister is in there. How many others? What are they being told? What are they planning? We argued late into the night. Henry and Douglas thought it was too risky. Melissa was torn. But I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about that little girl I'd waved to during the raid. About Nathan. About Benjamin. About all the people who disappeared into divine isolation and never came back. In the end, we compromised. We'd continue surveillance from a distance. We'd try to identify as many members as possible, especially children. We'd document everything and build a case before taking any direct action. For the next 2 weeks, we took turns watching New Eden. We rented a cabin about 20 minutes away as our base of operations. We set up cameras in the trees near the property line, carefully hidden. We started to piece together their routine. Morning prayers at dawn, work in the fields until noon, afternoon study, evening worship, just like the garden. But there were differences too. More security, stricter control. No one ever left the property alone. Then one day, while reviewing footage from our hidden cameras, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A familiar face. Nathan, my friend, from the garden. The one who disappeared into divine isolation years ago. He was alive, walking across the yard, carrying firewood. But something was wrong. His movements were stiff, mechanical. His face, blank. That's not possible, I whispered, staring at the screen. He disappeared years ago. Melissa leaned in, squinting at the image. Are you sure it's him? Positive. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Nathan had been my first friend at the garden, the first person to disappear after I reported him. And now, he was here, at New Eden. We need to get him out, I said. We need to get everyone out, Melissa corrected me. But we still didn't have enough evidence of actual crimes to get the authorities involved. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Nathan's face, that blank expression. What had they done to him? Was he drugged, brainwashed? I remembered the books I'd found in the prophet's study at the garden, the ones about mind control techniques. Had they perfected those methods at New Eden? The next morning, I got a text from Ryan. His sister had sent him detailed instructions on how to join them. There would be a gathering in 3 days. New members would be welcomed. It was the perfect opportunity to get inside. Absolutely not, Melissa said when I showed her the message. It's too dangerous. It's our only chance, I argued. Ryan's not going, obviously. But I could go in his place. I know their ways. I know how to act, what to say. They'll recognize you, Henry pointed out. You were a high-ranking member who betrayed them. They probably have your picture on a wall somewhere labeled enemy of the faith or something. He was right. I couldn't go. But maybe someone else could. What about me? Douglas suggested. I was just a regular member, not high-ranking. And I left before the raid so they might not connect me to what happened. We spent hours debating it. The risks were enormous. If they recognized Douglas, or if he slipped up somehow, he could end up like Nathan, or worse. But we needed eyes. Inside. We needed to know what was happening to the people there, especially the children. In the end, Douglas agreed to go. We created a backstory for him. He'd been living with relatives after leaving the garden, but had grown disillusioned with the outside world. He'd heard about New Eden through Ryan's sister and wanted to return to the faith. We equipped him with a tiny camera hidden in a button on his shirt and a small audio recorder sewn into the hem of his jacket. Nothing that would be found in a casual search. He memorized the location of every exit from the main buildings based on what we'd observed. We set up emergency signals. If he didn't check in every 12 hours, we'd call the police. The day of the gathering, I hugged Douglas tightly before he left. Be careful, I whispered. Any sign of trouble, you get out. Don't try to be a hero. He nodded, his face serious. I'll be fine. I know these people. I know how they think. We watched from our hiding spot in the woods as Douglas approached the main gate of New Eden. 2 guards met him. There was a brief conversation. Then, they let him in. For the next 3 days, we got sporadic updates from Douglas. Short text messages when he could get away to the bathroom or had a moment alone. All good. Meeting the chosen voice tomorrow. Lots of new members. Nothing substantial, but at least we knew he was alive. On the fourth day, the messages stopped. I was frantic. Something's wrong. We need to go get him. We can't just storm in there, Henry argued. We'll get ourselves caught, and probably Douglas too if he's still alive. We give it 24 more hours, Melissa decided. If we don't hear from him by then, we call the police. Those were the longest 24 hours of my life. I kept imagining Douglas tied to the prayer post like Benjamin had been, or locked in a dark room like I had been. Or worse. Just as we were about to call the police, my phone buzzed. A text from Douglas's number. Meet at the Old Oak, midnight. The Old Oak was a massive tree at the edge of the property, visible from our surveillance spot. It was where members of New Eden hung lanterns during their nighttime ceremonies. It could be a trap, Henry warned. They could have his phone. Or it could be our only chance to get him out, I countered. We decided I would go alone. Melissa. And Henry would stay hidden nearby with a car running, ready for a quick escape if needed. I wore dark clothes and moved through the woods as quietly as I could, my heart hammering in my chest. The old oak loomed ahead, its massive branches silhouetted against the night sky. No sign of Douglas. I checked my watch. 11:58 p.m. I pressed myself against the trunk of a nearby tree, waiting. At exactly midnight, a figure emerged from the shadows. Not Douglas. A woman. It took me a moment to recognize her in the darkness. Betty? I whispered. She startled, peering into the darkness. Who's there? I stepped forward cautiously. Betty had been one of the kitchen supervisors at the garden, a stern woman who'd once made me scrub pots for hours as punishment for dropping a plate. I hadn't seen her during our surveillance of New Eden. It's me, I said quietly. From the garden. Her eyes widened. You, the traitor. But she didn't run or call for help. Where's Douglas? I demanded. He was supposed to meet me here. Betty glanced over her shoulder nervously. They took him to purification. He was asking too many questions. They found his camera. My blood ran cold. Purification. That's what they'd called the worst punishments at the garden. Is he alive? She nodded. For now, but you need to leave. They know you're watching. They've seen your cameras. The chosen voice has ordered a cleansing. What does that mean? Betty's voice dropped even lower. They're moving tomorrow night, taking everyone to a new location. Those who aren't deemed worthy won't be going. Who's not worthy? I pressed. The questioners, the doubters. She paused. The children who cry for their parents? I felt sick. We need to stop them. We need to get everyone out. Betty shook her head. You don't understand. Many of us want to be there. We believe in the chosen voice. We've seen his power. What power? What has he done? A strange light came into Betty's eyes. He healed my arthritis with just a touch. He predicted the exact day my sister would call me after 15 years of silence. He knows things. Things he couldn't possibly know. I recognized the look on her face, the same fervent belief I'd seen in so many at the garden. Betty? Listen to me. Thomas is not what he claims to be. He's manipulating you, just like David Marks did. She backed away. You're the one who's been deceived. The outside world has poisoned you. Then why are you here? Why did you text from Douglas's phone? She hesitated. I was concerned about some of the children, the ones who were brought here against their will. They shouldn't be punished for their parents' lack of faith. I seized on this opening. Help us get them out. Help us get Douglas out. Betty looked torn. I can't betray the faith. You won't be, I said. You'll be saving innocent lives. Isn't that what your faith is supposed to be about? She was silent for a long moment. Then, the children are kept in the east building, second floor. Douglas is in the basement of the main house. The purification ceremony starts at dawn. She turned to go. Betty, I called softly. Thank you. She didn't look back. I was never here. You never saw me. I raced back to where Melissa and Henry were waiting and told them everything. We had hours, not days. Whatever this purification was, it sounded like people would die. We need to call the police, Henry insisted. And tell them what? I countered. That a cult is moving locations? That's not illegal. We need evidence of actual crimes. Douglas might have gotten some on his camera before they caught him, Melissa suggested. I nodded. We need to get in there tonight. We formulated a desperate plan. Henry would create a distraction at the main gate, something to draw the guards away. Melissa and I would slip in through the weak spot in the fence we'd identified during our surveillance. I would try to reach Douglas in the basement while Melissa went to the east building to check on the children. It was insane. Dangerous. Probably stupid. But we couldn't wait for morning, not with lives at stake. Henry drove his car right up to the main gate around 2 a.m., honking and flashing his lights like a hammered driver. As we'd hoped, the guards rushed to confront him. While they were distracted, Melissa and I slipped through a gap in the fence where it met a drainage ditch. The compound was eerily quiet. Most members would be asleep, except for the night guards. We stuck to the shadows, moving silently toward the main house. Years of sneaking around the garden to avoid punishment had made us good at this. "Be careful," I whispered to Melissa as we split up. She nodded, heading toward the east building, while I approached the main house. Finding a way in was easier than I expected. A window to what looked like a pantry had been left slightly open. I squeezed through, finding myself surrounded by shelves of canned goods. The familiar smell of the garden's preserved vegetables hit me like a physical blow, bringing back memories I'd tried to forget. I crept through the dark house, trying to remember the layout from our surveillance photos. The basement access would likely be in or near the kitchen. I found a door that looked promising and carefully opened it. Stairs descended into darkness. I took out my phone, using its dim light to navigate the steps. The basement was divided into several rooms. Most doors were unlocked, revealing storage areas or what looked like meditation spaces. But one door at the end of the hall was padlocked. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. "Douglas?" I whispered as loudly as I dared. "Are you in there?" A muffled sound came from inside. I looked around desperately for something to break the lock. On a nearby shelf, I found a heavy wrench, probably used for maintenance. I wrapped my jacket around it to muffle the sound and struck the padlock as hard as I could. Once, twice, 3 times. It finally gave way. I pulled the door open. The stench hit me first: sweat, urine, fear. Then my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Douglas was there, tied to a chair, his face bruised and swollen. But he wasn't alone. Nathan was there too, along with 3 other people I didn't recognize, all in similar conditions. "Oh my God," I breathed, rushing to untie Douglas. "What happened?" His voice was new, somehow. "They knew. Somehow they knew I was with you. They've been watching us too." I moved to untie Nathan next. He stared at me with almost no recognition in his eyes. "Nathan? It's me. Do you remember me?" A flicker of awareness crossed his face. I could see him struggling to focus, as if fighting through a fog. "They've been drugging him for years," Douglas explained as I untied the others. "All of them. Some kind of cocktail that makes them compliant. They use them for manual labor and..." He trailed off. "And what? Experiments. Thomas thinks he can perfect some kind of mind control. Make people completely loyal through a combination of substances, isolation, and what he calls a spiritual realignment." I felt sick. "We need to get everyone out now." One of the other captives, a woman with hollow cheeks and dull eyes, spoke up. "There are more in the other buildings, people who resisted." "Melissa's checking the east building," I told her. "We're going to get everyone out." We helped the captives up the stairs, moving as quietly as possible. Nathan and one of the others could barely walk, so Douglas and I had to support them. We made it to the kitchen when the light suddenly blazed on. "I knew you'd come." Elder Thomas stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. He looked exactly as I remembered him, tall, thin, with that same cold smile that never reached his eyes. Our prodigal daughter returned at last. I pushed Nathan behind me protectively. "This is over, Thomas. We know what you've been doing. The police are on their way." It was a lie, but he didn't know that. He laughed. "The authorities? They've investigated us before, found nothing. We're simply a religious community, living according to our beliefs." "Drugging people isn't a religious belief," I shot back. "Neither is imprisonment or child abuse." Thomas's smile faded. "You always were trouble. Even at the garden, David saw it in you. That rebellious spirit. He should have dealt with you more firmly." "Like you dealt with Nathan?" I nodded toward my friend, who was swaying on his feet, eyes struggling to focus. "What did you do to him?" "I saved him," Thomas said simply. freed him from doubt, from the pain of individual thought. He serves a higher purpose now. One of the guards moved forward, but Thomas held up a hand to stop him. Don't worry, they won't get far. The gates are locked, the perimeter secured. He looked at me, almost pityingly. Did you really think it would be so easy? A crash sounded from outside, followed by shouting. Thomas's head whipped around. What was that? I used the distraction to act. I shoved the heavy kitchen table into Thomas and his guards, sending them stumbling. Run! I shouted to the others. We burst out of the kitchen door into chaos. Lights were on all over the compound. People in white garments were rushing about in confusion. And in the center of it all was Melissa, leading a group of children and teenagers toward the main gate, which now stood open. Henry had come through somehow. He'd managed to get the gate open. Go! I yelled to Douglas and the others, pointing toward the gate. Get them out! I ran toward Melissa, helping her herd the frightened children. Some were crying. Others looked dazed. I recognized a few faces from the garden. We need to hurry, Melissa gasped. They're starting to organize. She was right. The initial confusion was giving way to a coordinated response. Guards were appearing with flashlights, forming a line to block the gate. This way, I said, pulling her and the children toward a different section of the fence, the drainage ditch we'd used to enter. We can get out here! We rushed toward it, helping the smaller children through first. Behind us, shouts grew louder. They were coming. I looked back and saw Thomas striding across the yard, pointing in our direction. His face was contorted with rage. Several guards ran ahead of him, gaining on us quickly. Go! I pushed Melissa toward the fence. Get the kids out. I'll hold them off. I'm not leaving you, she protested. You have to. The children need you. She hesitated, then nodded, helping the last few children through the gap in the fence. I turned to face the approaching guards, grabbing a fallen branch to defend myself. The first guard reached me, lunging forward. I swung the branch, catching him in the stomach. He doubled over, but another was right behind him. I felt a blow to my shoulder that sent me stumbling. Then suddenly, Nathan was there. Nathan, who had been struggling to focus just minutes before, who had been dragged into compliance for years. He tackled the guard who'd hit me, sending them both crashing to the ground. Nathan! I cried out in shock. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw clarity there, a flash of the boy I'd known years ago. Go! He rasped, his voice rusty from disuse. I didn't want to leave him, but more guards were coming. I had no choice. I squeezed through the fence, tearing my jacket on the barbed wire. Melissa was waiting on the other side with the children. Where's Henry? I asked, breathless. At the cars, she replied. He brought both vehicles. We'll need them for everyone. We hurried through the woods, guiding the terrified children behind us. Alarms began to sound from New Eden. They were organizing a search. We reached the road where Henry waited with his car and Melissa's Honda. He looked shocked at the number of people with us. Get in, he urged, opening doors quickly. We packed the children into the vehicles, along with Douglas and the other adults we'd rescued from the basement. There wasn't enough room for everyone. I'll stay, I said. Get them to safety. Call the police. Come back for me. No way, Melissa argued. We're not leaving you here. There's no choice, I insisted. I know these woods. I can hide until you come back. Before she could protest further, headlights appeared on the road. A van was approaching from the direction of New Eden. Go! I shouted, pushing Melissa toward her car. Now! They drove off just as the van rounded the corner. I darted back into the woods, running as fast as I could away from the road. Behind me, I heard car doors slam, voices calling out. They were searching for us. I ran until my lungs burned, then found a dense thicket to hide in. I made myself as small as possible, hardly daring to breathe. Hours passed. The search continued, but they didn't find me. As dawn broke, I heard vehicles leaving. They were giving up for now. I waited until the forest was completely silent before moving. My phone was dead, so I had no way to contact Melissa or Henry. I'd have to make my way back to civilization on my own. I oriented myself using the rising sun and started walking. After about an hour, I reached a rural highway. I followed it until I came to a gas station, where I asked to use their phone. Melissa answered on the first ring. Where are you? We've been searching all night. I gave her my location, and within 30 minutes, she and Henry pulled up in her Honda. I collapsed into the back seat, utterly exhausted. The children? I asked. Safe, Henry assured me. We took them to the police station, They're contacting parents and social services. And the others? Douglas? The people from the basement? At the hospital, Melissa said. Douglas is pretty banged up, but he'll be okay. The others? It's going to take time. Whatever substances Thomas was using, they did a lot of damage. Nathan? I asked, dreading the answer. Melissa's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. He didn't make it out, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Nathan, who'd saved me at the end, who'd shown that moment of clarity just long enough to help me escape. After all these years, all he'd endured, he'd still found the strength to resist their conditioning, when it mattered most. The police? I asked, changing the subject before grief overwhelmed me. They've got a warrant to search New Eden, Henry explained. Douglas's testimony, plus the condition of the people we rescued, was enough. And the children's statements? What did they say? Henry's face darkened. Bad stuff. Isolation, punishments, forced labor. Some of the older ones talked about special ceremonies with Thomas that they weren't allowed to discuss. I felt sick. Will it be enough to shut them down for good this time? I don't know, Melissa admitted. These groups are slippery. Even with David Marks in prison, they managed to reorganize. Thomas might have contingency plans. She was right. Cults don't die easily. Cut off one head and another grows in its place. We'd rescued some people, but how many were still trapped in the cycle of abuse and control? How many other groups like New Eden existed across the country, hidden away in rural areas, preying on the vulnerable? We need to keep fighting, I said, my exhaustion giving way to determination. We need to expose them all. Henry glanced back at me. You need to rest first. You look like you're about to collapse. He wasn't wrong. I was running on adrenaline and nothing else. But rest would have to wait. There was too much to do. Too many people still needed help. As we drove back toward town, I stared out the window at the passing landscape. Somewhere out there, Thomas and his followers were probably already regrouping, finding a new location, recruiting new victims. And Nathan was still with him, lost in whatever mental prison they'd created for him. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time since escaping the garden, I felt like we were fighting back effectively. We'd saved lives tonight. We'd brought some light into the darkness, and we were just getting started. The police raid on New Eden happened 2 days later. I watched from Melissa's car as officers in tactical gear swarmed the compound. But I already knew what they'd find. Nothing. The place was empty. Thomas and his followers had cleared out, taking Nathan and anyone else who hadn't escaped with them. They'd vanished like smoke. The detective in charge, a tired-looking guy named Richards, took our statements at the station. He didn't seem surprised when I told him about the mass exodus. These groups are like cockroaches, he said, rubbing his eyes. Scatter when the lights come on, regroup somewhere else. I handed him the photos and videos we'd collected during our surveillance. There's evidence of forced imprisonment and abuse. Isn't that enough to arrest Thomas? Richards sighed. If we can find him, sure. But these people are good at disappearing. They probably have fake IDs, cash reserves. Could be anywhere by now. I left the station feeling defeated. We'd rescued some people, but Thomas was still out there with Nathan and who knows how many others. I crashed at Melissa's place that night, too exhausted to even dream. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The faithful remain. The unfaithful will be purged. I showed it to Melissa, my hands shaking. They know my number. Block it, she said immediately, and we should get you a new phone. I did, but the damage was done. They knew how to reach me. They were watching. The thought made my skin crawl. For the next few weeks, we focused on helping the people we'd rescued. The children were placed with relatives or in foster care. Douglas recovered from his injuries and started counseling. The adults from the basement, we learned their names were Patrick, Brenda, and Julie, faced a harder road. Years of whatever substances Thomas had given them had left them with tremors, memory issues, and trouble functioning independently. I visited them at the rehabilitation center where they had been placed. Patrick was starting to form complete sentences again. Brenda could feed herself now. Julie still stared at walls for hours, but sometimes she'd hum, a tiny sign that some part of her was still in there. Any news about Nathan? Patrick asked during one visit. His speech was slurred but improving. I shook my head. Nothing. Yet. But we're looking. That wasn't entirely true. We had no idea where to look. Thomas and his followers had disappeared completely. The police investigation stalled without new leads. Detective Richards called occasionally to update me, but there wasn't much to say. Then one day, about a month after the raid, I got another text. The faithful gather where the river meets the stone. The chosen voice calls his children home. I immediately called Melissa. They're contacting me again. What did they say? I read her the message. That sounds like a location, she said. A river and some kind of stone formation. I spent days researching, looking for any place that might match the description. I called former garden members asking if they'd heard of such a location. I scoured maps and local histories of surrounding states. Nothing seemed to fit. I was beginning to think it was just a metaphor, not a real place at all. Then Betty, the woman who'd helped us at New Eden, reached out through a mutual contact. She'd escaped during the chaos of our rescue operation and had been in hiding. Stone River Junction, she told me over a secure line. It's a small, abandoned town about 4 hours north. Thomas mentioned it once as a contingency location. I felt a surge of hope, mixed with suspicion. Could it really be this straightforward, after all our searching? I called Detective Richards immediately, but his response was frustrating. We can't just raid a town based on a vague text message and secondhand information, he explained. We need probable cause, evidence of actual crimes happening there now. So what, we just wait until more people get hurt? I demanded. Look, he said, his voice softening. I believe you. I do. But my hands are tied legally. If you find something concrete, call me right away. I hung up, fuming. Looks like it's up to us again, I told Melissa and Henry. We decided to drive to Stone River Junction the next day. Just reconnaissance like before. See if Thomas and his followers were really there. Gather evidence if possible, then call Richards. The town was even more depressing than I'd imagined. Boarded-up storefronts lined the main street. The factory that had once been the town's economic center loomed at the edge of town, a hulking concrete skeleton. The few people we saw eyed us suspiciously as we drove through. Not exactly inconspicuous, Henry muttered as we parked outside what used to be a diner. Everyone staring at us. Let's split up, I suggested. We'll cover more ground. Meet back here in an hour. Melissa looked worried. Is that safe? Safer than all of us wandering around together, I pointed out. We stick out enough as it is. We agreed on a plan. Henry would check the north side of town, Melissa the east, and I'd take the south, where the river actually ran past the town. We'd stay in contact via text, checking in every 15 minutes. The southern edge of Stone River Junction was even more rundown than the center. Abandoned houses with collapsing roofs lined potholed streets. The river itself was narrow and sluggish, bordered by scrubby trees. I walked along its bank, looking for any sign of activity. After about 20 minutes, I spotted something. A house set back from the others, its windows intact, smoke rising from the chimney despite the warm weather. As I watched, a figure in white garments emerged from the back door, carrying what looked like laundry to a line strung between trees. My heart raced. I ducked behind a large oak tree, pulling out my phone to text Melissa and Henry. No signal, of course. I debated what to do, go back to the car and get the others, or try to get closer, maybe get some photos as evidence. The second option was risky, but who knew if they'd still be here if I left and came back? I decided to get closer. Moving. From tree to tree, I made my way toward the house. As I got nearer, I could see more details. The laundry on the line was all white, the same garments we'd worn at the garden. There were symbols painted on the door, the same ones Thomas had used in his teachings at New Eden. I needed to get photos. I pulled out my phone again. Still, no signal, but the camera would work. I snapped several pictures of the house, the symbols, the white garments. I was about to retreat when I heard voices approaching. I pressed myself against a tree trunk, hardly daring to breathe. 2 men walked past just a few feet away. One was complaining about guard duty. The chosen voice says we need to be vigilant. The other replied, the betrayers know we're here. How? We've been careful. Someone's been sending messages, trying to draw them in. They moved out of earshot. Messages? Was someone inside the group contacting me? But who? Nathan was still drugged, as far as I knew. Betty had escaped. Was there someone else? I needed to get back to Melissa and Henry. I started to back away from the house, moving as quietly as possible. I'd gone about 50 yards when I stepped on a branch. The crack seemed deafening in the quiet. Who's there? A voice called. Out. I froze, then ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. Behind me, shouts. They'd seen me. I ran faster, my lungs burning, heading back toward town. I burst out of the trees onto a street of abandoned houses. No sign of pursuit yet, but they weren't far behind. I ducked into the nearest building, a derelict store with broken windows. Inside, dust covered everything. I crouched behind a fallen shelf, trying to control my breathing. Footsteps passed outside, voices calling to each other. They were searching for me. I stayed perfectly still, counting seconds in my head. 1 minute. 2. The voices grew fainter. When I was sure they were gone, I crept out and made my way back toward the center of town, sticking to alleys and side streets. I reached our meeting point just as Melissa and Henry were returning. "Where have you been?" Melissa hissed. "We've been texting you for half an hour." "No signal by the river," I explained breathlessly. "But I found them. They're here." We got in the car and I told them everything as Henry drove us out of town. The house, the white garments, the conversation I'd overheard. "Someone inside is sending me those messages," I concluded. "Trying to help us find them or lure us into a trap," Henry pointed out. "Either way, we need to tell Richards," Melissa said. "This is actual evidence." I called him as soon as we had cell service again. He listened to my story, asked a few questions, then sighed. "It's still thin. White clothes and some weird symbols aren't proof of criminal activity." "They were chasing me," I protested. "Because you were trespassing and taking photos of their property," he countered. "Look, I'm not dismissing you. I'll send a deputy to drive by, see if there's anything obvious. But I can't get a warrant based on this." I hung up, frustrated. "He's not going to do anything." "Then we need more evidence," Melissa said simply. We spent the next few days planning. We couldn't just barge in like we had at New Eden. That had been chaotic and dangerous, and we'd been lucky to get out alive. We needed a smarter approach. "What about the person sending the messages?" Henry suggested. "If we could communicate with them directly, maybe they could help us." I stared at my new phone. I blocked the number on my old phone. I don't even know what it was. "Your provider might have records," Melissa pointed out. She was right. I called my phone company, explained I needed to retrieve a blocked number for a police investigation. They were reluctant at first, but eventually gave me the number. I sent a text. "Who are you? How can I help?" Hours passed with no response. I was about to give up when my phone buzzed. "Not safe to talk. Too many eyes. Come alone. The old factory. Midnight tomorrow." I showed Melissa and Henry. "Absolutely not," Melissa said immediately. "It's a trap." "Maybe," I admitted. "But what if it's not? What if someone inside really wants help?" We argued for hours. In the end, we compromised. I would go to the meeting, but Melissa and Henry would be nearby, watching. At the first sign of trouble, they'd call Richards, trap or no trap. The next night, we drove back to Stone River Junction. The town was even creepier in the dark, streetlights broken, windows like empty eye sockets. We parked a few blocks from the factory, and I walked the rest of the way alone while Melissa and Henry found a vantage point. The factory loomed against the night sky, a massive concrete structure with broken windows. The main entrance was chained shut, but a side door hung open on rusted hinges. I slipped inside, using my phone's flashlight to navigate. The interior was cavernous, filled with the hulking shadows of abandoned machinery. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. I felt exposed, vulnerable. "Hello?" I called softly. "I'm here." Nothing. Just the dripping water. The distant hoot of an owl outside. I moved deeper into the factory, my light casting strange shadows. "I got your messages," I tried again. "I want to help." A sound behind me. I whirled around, my light catching a figure standing in the shadows. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Her hair was different, her face thinner. But those eyes, I knew those eyes. "Betty?" She stepped forward cautiously. "You came alone." I nodded, not mentioning Melissa and Henry nearby. "How did you get away from them?" "I didn't," she said simply. "I'm still with them. Thomas trusts me. I'm one of his inner circle now." I tensed, ready to run. Was this the trap after all? Betty must have seen my fear. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because—" She hesitated. "Because what?" "They're doing is wrong. The substances, the beatings, the children." Her voice broke. Why not just leave? I asked. It's not that simple. Thomas has my grandson. My daughter brought him to New Eden, but she started asking questions. Now she's gone, and he's keeping Daniel as insurance of my loyalty. My heart sank. Another child trapped in Thomas's web. How old is he? 7. The same age I'd been when I arrived at the garden. He's so scared. He cries for his mother at night. We can help you both get out, I promised. But I need information. Evidence? The police can use. Betty nodded. Thomas is planning something big, a final purification, he calls it, for those who aren't deemed worthy of the next phase. What does that mean? I don't know exactly, but he's been stockpiling substances more than before, and he talks about releasing souls from their earthly vessels. A chill ran down my spine. When? 3 days from now, the summer solstice. Mass suicide. That's what it sounded like. Or murder disguised as salvation. Either way, people would die. I need proof, I told her. Something I can take to the police. Betty reached into her pocket, pulled out a small notebook. Thomas's schedule, the names of his suppliers, locations of other safe houses. She handed it to me. And this. A small vial of clear liquid. The substance they've been using, the one that makes people compliant. I took them carefully. This should be enough. But you need to get out now. Come with me. You and Daniel. She shook her head. I can't. Daniel is never left alone. And if I disappear, Thomas will know I betrayed him. He'll move everyone immediately. Then what's your plan? The night of the purification. There will be chaos. That's when I'll take Daniel and run. Meet me at the river crossing. The old bridge. Midnight. I didn't like it, but I understood her reasoning. We'll be there. And Betty, thank you. She turned to go, then paused. Nathan is still alive. But he's not the same person you knew. Whatever they gave him, it changed him. He follows orders. But there's still something there, deep inside. Sometimes I see him fighting against the substances, like he's trying to remember who he was. I swallowed hard. We'll help him too. All of them. Betty slipped away into the darkness. I waited a few minutes, then made my way back outside to where Melissa and Henry were waiting. Well? Melissa demanded as soon as I reached them. I showed them the notebook and vial. We need to get these to Richards. Now. This time, Richards took us seriously. The notebook contained detailed records of substance purchases, names, dates. The vial tested positive for a powerful sedative mixed with hallucinogens. He got his warrant. The raid was planned for the night before the solstice. Richards assembled a team from multiple jurisdictions, local police, state troopers, even FBI agents specializing in cults. I insisted on coming along, staying back with the paramedics, of course, but close enough to identify people and help. The victims. We gathered at a staging area a few miles from Stone River Junction. Richards went over the plan one last time. We go in fast and quiet. Primary objective is securing any children or vulnerable adults. Secondary is apprehending Thomas and his lieutenants. I sat in a police van with Melissa and Henry, watching the officers check their gear. My stomach was in knots. What if Betty had been discovered? What if they'd already moved on? The convoy moved out just after sunset. No sirens, no lights, just a line of vehicles moving through the gathering darkness. We stopped about half a mile from the house I discovered, continuing on foot. Richards and his team surrounded the house while Melissa, Henry, and I waited, with the paramedics. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then suddenly shouts, flashes cutting through the darkness, the sound of a door being broken down, more shouting, a gunshot. My heart stopped. Then, officers began emerging from the house, leading people in white garments. Some came willingly. Others struggled, screaming about betrayal and salvation. I scanned the faces desperately, looking for Nathan, for Betty, and her grandson. I didn't see them. An officer approached us. We've secured the main house. No casualties except one officer with a minor injury. We've got about 20 adults and 5 children. There should be more, I said, my voice tight with worry. Where are the others? The officer shook his head. That's all we found. Richards joined us, his face grim. The house was mostly empty. Looks like they were in the process of moving out. We got some of them, but Thomas isn't here. Neither are many of the people you described. My blood ran cold. The factory! Check the factory! Richards didn't waste time asking questions. He redirected half his team to the abandoned factory, while the rest processed the people they'd already detained. We followed the second group to the factory. As we approached, I could see lights inside, flashlights moving through the cavernous space. Officers called to each other, their voices echoing off concrete walls. Then someone shouted, "In here! We need medics!" Paramedics rushed past us into the building. Richards held us back. "Stay here until we secure the scene." But I couldn't wait. I pushed past him, running into the factory. Inside was chaos, officers moving in all directions, radios crackling. I followed the paramedics to a large room at the back of the building. What I saw there will haunt me forever. People in white garments lying on mats arranged in a circle. Some were already dead, others were barely breathing, foam at their mouths. In the center of the circle stood Thomas, holding a cup, his face serene even as officers tackled him to the ground. I scanned the room frantically. There. Betty, holding a small boy who must be Daniel, both alive, though Betty looked dazed. And across the room, being checked by a paramedic, Nathan. His eyes met mine, and for just a moment, I saw recognition there. The next few hours passed in a blur. Ambulances, police questioning, the living taken to hospitals, the dead to the morgue. Thomas in handcuffs, still smiling that serene smile as they led him away. 12 people died that night. 8 more were in critical condition. The children, thankfully, were all alive. Thomas had planned to purify the adults first, then decide the children's fate afterward. Betty and Daniel were among the lucky ones. She'd managed to avoid drinking the poisoned cup, pretending to sip while actually spilling it on the ground. Nathan had been given a smaller dose than the others, perhaps because Thomas still found him useful. In the hospital the next day, I sat by Nathan's bed while he slept. The doctor said the substances would take time to leave his system. They couldn't promise he'd ever fully recover. Too many years of chemical manipulation had taken their toll. I held his hand, remembering the boy who'd made me laugh during silence drills, who'd asked if the trees outside the fence were really poisonous. I didn't know if that boy still existed somewhere inside this hollow shell, but I'd be there, either way. Thomas and several of his lieutenants were charged with multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and abuse. The evidence was overwhelming this time. Not just Betty's testimony and the records she'd provided, but the scene at the factory itself. There would be no escaping justice. The survivors faced a long road to recovery. Some, like Nathan, might never fully heal. Others would need years of therapy and support. The children would hopefully be young enough to adapt, to learn that the world outside wasn't poison after all. As for me, Melissa, and Henry, we kept our little rescue operation going. There were other groups out there, other Thomas types preying on the vulnerable. Other children who needed someone to wave to them through a window to show them there was hope. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still flinch at certain phrases that remind me of the garden. I still check the locks on my doors twice before going to bed, but I'm healing too, in my own way. Last week I visited Nathan in the care facility where he now lives. He doesn't speak much, but he can feed himself now, can dress himself. Small victories. I brought him a plant, a little cactus in a bright blue pot. "For your window," I told him. Something green to look at. He took it carefully, set it on the sill where the sun would reach it. Then he turned to me, his face as blank as ever, but he reached out. He touched my hand briefly. "Friend," he said. Just that one word, his voice rusty from disuse. It was enough.